Thank you. Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you to SALT team for starting your research about performance art and inviting me to become part of this talk series with such an amazing participants. I'm Simge. I'm a performance curator, founding director of International Performance Art, Performistanbul, and Performistanbul Live Art Research Space. Today, I would like to talk about our everyday fight for performance arts continuity and sustainability through the questions how performance art can be preserved, what are the roles of remainings of performance art, what is the right way of documenting a live work, how can these documentations affect the afterlife of performance art, and in what kind of conditions can performance be reperformed. Then I will finish with the biggest question, how to collect performance art. Actually, we have been working on these issues for 6 years. First, I founded Performistanbul to create a platform dedicated to live art in 2016 in order to gather performance artists under one roof. But then soon we realized that providing assistance to performance artists and presenting their works was not enough. We feel like we have a crucial role in the education and development of the performance art too. So as you see here, this is our home. I hope one day you can ring our bell yourself. Located in Performistanbul's building in the Old Galata neighborhood of Istanbul. Even if our platform has a spaceless identity, as we do not want to restrict the performance space, we thought that we need a physical space for conducting research in the field. As you can see here, we are collecting various archives and resources in the field of performance art, along with performance remains from Turkey and all over the world. Now we have just 1,000 resources, but our aim is to reach 7,000, so still much to do. The main reason for this is to close the gaps in this field, to understand history and pass it on to next generations. Actually, it is Turkey's first research space dedicated to live art. And yeah, it also has its own challenge. So we follow the model of world's leading research space, Live Art Development Agency based in London, in the purpose of making an impact on the educational and development of performance arts by housing essential resources. Then, following the needs of academics, researchers, and students, we noticed the lack of resources about performance art in Turkish language. And we launched Performistanbul Publications, a digital online platform, in order to provide new sources in field in which selected publications on live art published in foreign languages are translated into Turkish. Also, 2020, we launched our performance art-focused artist residence program, along with the funding of the first performance art practices course in Istanbul Bilgi University. So our approach is 360 degrees to performance art. And I am happy to say that I will be building this presentation based on experiences that we encountered and gained in Performistanbul. I'm saying this because I hope this presentation by itself will become an evidence that reveals possibilities to keep performance arts afterlife. Talking about the concrete examples that we revive together may help to convince us that performance arts can eventually be documentable, collectible, and preservable. So now I'm going to start with some audience interactions that I will analyze through a selection of participatory mass performances. Audience interactions, which are one of the major points for the performance, they affect the whole content of the whole story. Sometimes the audience can have more power than the artist as a performer, as a participant. So here you see a Needed You performance video from 2018 from our longest performance art group exhibition that we realized. It was a live process, and our door was open 28 days, day and night. It lasted 672 hours long without interval. So actually the duration became an artwork by itself. So this process was about reminding the power of each individual person. Therefore, the audience reactions and interactions turned into an artwork by itself too. So as our aim was build the space with the support of people, the help of a community, we invited people to our building while it was still in construction. As we shared during Needed You, all the ticket revenue was donated to the Performistanbul Performance Art Development Association in order to found and develop the research space. Each visitor contributed as one ticket meant one book. So, in this part, with the example of Atadore's Modesty performance, here I would like to underline the fact that even though you make a perfect documentation and archiving, these potential body-to-body exchanges in live performances are lost through collecting activities. The artist did not eat by himself for 28 days and waited for the audience to feed him. By giving such vital power and responsibility to the audience, he investigated the relationship between people and society, social dynamics, and the limits of being an individual. So, even though these images are very precious, as they are the recordings of key moments, a single viewpoint doesn't provide enough elements to grasp the performance. So, of course, you can capture the emotions, but it does not mean that you transfer the emotion. Yeah, actually, how can a work that lasts 28 days without an interval be sensed through images only? But still, we did our best to transfer these experiences, and we create a website for Needed You. It's an interactive digital archive. As you see some screenshots from the website, we try to scan every single item that remained from the performance and try to recreate the room on the screen, you see, even though we knew that it won't be enough to transfer the real physical experience. These specific interactions become part of the performance and create a social collective memory, which of course cannot be saved, transferred, or kept. So with this introduction, I would like to underline the nature of performance. Defined by its ephemerality, performance art cannot be documented. I mean, when it is, it turns into that document, a photograph, a video art, and would no longer be performance art. This will be my approach for the documents. So, looking at the problems of preserving performance, we need to accept that the practice of body-to-body transmission is lost in time. On one hand, memory cannot be kept in a body and remain, but on the other hand, oral storytelling, repeated gestures, and ritual enactment are not practices that disappear. Therefore, being housed always in the live, the physical transmission disappears and cannot be transferable nor kept at all. So let's continue with the challenges of documentation live actions in public spaces. Here you see some shots from Tanya Ostoic's performance workshop realized in Istanbul in September 2021. All the performances that were actualized during the workshop were presented in public spaces, to be more specific, in the streets of Istanbul. So, I would like to ask this question. If archiving performance art is such a challenge, then why we are still forcing to document the ephemeral? Maybe before talking through the nature of performance art discipline, first we need to ask ourselves, is it because of our survival instinct, driven by the need to be alive? Perhaps a fear, time, and death? What do you think? The urge of insurance of survival of the past moments? A desire to not only present, but collect? I think it's coming from its medium. human as material, and human as survivor, as nature. So without archive, history is lost. And without history, how can we pass the memory to the next generations? Even though these photographies are just frozen images, it transfers knowledge, recognition, and improvement. Importance of the purpose of the documentation also affects how we should make the documentation. So the absence of the documentation of these embodied practice will make future preservation efforts especially challenging. That's why maybe we should first ask and think about the purpose of the documentation. So where and why will it be used, and what is the documentation's role in the reactivation of the work? So we, as you see here, this is me. So we try to keep recording every step of the process of a whole. Like here, our documentation process is starting from the idea of the performance. We are not just concentrating on producing a work, but we have to deal simultaneously with its afterlife beyond the moment of execution, always thinking how it would be communicated and how it would remain. Even it is requiring a great effort, and even if there are still no public entities that can guarantee its sustainability, we still try our best to keep this archive. So on the left, here we see a sketch from the artist who sent us a performance idea. Then this sketch turns to the performance that you can see on the right. So how you react to the idea also affects the work. Since we're producing the work together with the artist starting from zero, the whole process becomes part of the performance and its archive. So in this category, we have all kinds of documents containing information related to content of the performance. That's why pre-performance documents such as performance proposals, contracts, communication materials, posters, flyers, and all other written, printed, physical, and digital materials are all pre-performance materials that very much important. So now we can talk about the documentation for the re-performance and how to keep track of remaining's journey. So on the left, you see the space where Gülhatun Yıldırım's water performance was realized for the first time in winter in 2016 in a completely sterile white cube gallery. And on the right, 2 years later, we see the re-performance in a different city in summer in a very different outdoor environment. A re-performance is not an exact repetition, as we cannot separate the work from the space, time, and environment it takes place. Thus, it becomes a new work, but maybe a continuation of the previous ones. And what about the documentation and remains? Same performances remaining. The plexiglass tub has been exhibited as a performance artist pedestal in a group exhibition displaying pedestals borrowed from various institutions. This display reveals new meanings of the remaining. So in another exhibition with a totally different context, it was exhibited as a performance object as a remain. And here we have some other display example still from the same performance. On the left, you see a triptych composed from Walter's photo documentation, and remains have been exhibited as part of an art fair. And on the right, the photo documentation of the performance that became an artwork itself is hung on collectors' houses' wall. So until nowadays, performance artworks have been mostly added to collections in the same way it has been archived. But what I want to say is, all forms are just after products of live performances. None of them is the performance by itself. They are, of course, survivors of past moments, which have been collected through various ways. Now let's discuss following question. What is performance art archive? What do we care about when we are creating an archive? Is it a collection of historical documents and information about performances? Is it a space where tiny pieces of performances are brought together? Or is it a transmitter of experience? Actually, a bit of each. First, we try to think of this archive not only as an information transmitter, but also as a memory transmitter. However, since the outcome of each performance is different, its archive also may strongly differ. So, remaining types, I will show you some remaining types here. This remaining as a performance sculpture. I would like to continue with, some various forms or archive as the outcome of a performance, but among the most known examples, there are photos, videos, and audio recordings of the process. However, there are many other outcomes to kept for the archives. As you see here, such as performance props, the performance materials specifically designed and manufactured for the performance. For example, in this work, artist Batu Bozoğlu built a two-handled clock sculpture. The participant gets on one side of the sculpture and the artist gets on the other side to activate it. So it creates a game of power between the artist and the participant. Here, the prop is essential for the performance. Without it, artists cannot perform. And another example remaining as a performance object, here the artist duo Aslı Meka aim to convert the exhibition venue into an active laboratory by reproducing the works using digital technologies, therefore enabling the audience to touch and feel the artworks. In Aslı Meka's performance, the props have been produced by 3D printer machine you see here, which is an example, as I mentioned, a remaining as performance object, but produced during the performance. So on the left, we see the 3D printed objects produced and displayed in the exhibition, and on the right, you have the remaining photo documentation. Then let's continue with Ekim Bernay's My Pieces video performance, a performance for camera. First, she molded her body parts by using plaster, creating a various casts. Then she used these plaster casts in her live performance, where spread on the sand around her body. This is a perfect example how, can be transformed, remains can be transformed during a performance. These casts, none of these objects could be produced after the performance. They are produced at the moment, carrying the traces of the moment. So contrary to Aslı Meka's performance, where props could be reproduced by a machine as much as needed, in this performance, each piece is unique. Even if the artist reperforms, the cast's shape will always differ. Then these remainings, including the plasters, casts, and the sand, here we see the remaining new roll as it became a piece of installation displayed in two different exhibitions. Among those, the exhibitions entitled This Is Not a Performance, which I created in 2018, the exhibition investigated the purpose of keeping and exhibiting performance remains while questioning its forms. How do we keep moments? How do we exhibit time or memory? Are these remains artworks by themselves, or do they just have the role of transmitting? It was like a research exhibition. In fact, it was a crucial example of how performance art could be archived, exhibited, and collected, in addition to more common formats such as photography and video. And here, another example is Selin Kocagöncü's performative installation, Dance Party for One. The performance is actualized by the participants who activates the performance alone by selecting a piece of music and playing it while dancing inside the dark space. So the act itself could not be documented. However, we kept the installation as well as the sound pieces used in the work. So sometimes, according to the nature of the work, you cannot be able to document the performance by respecting its nature and its requirements. This is Leman Sevda Darıcıoğlu's Empoisoned Princess performance. I think this is an excellent example of collected remains. In this work, during 11 days, the artist has collected found objects from Tarlabaşı neighborhood, then brought them daily to a gallery space where they displayed their findings in a creative way. In this photos, you see this sweet bear. Why it went to trash, I don't know. The artist collected the bear as one of the found objects and then brought it into the gallery, adding it to other findings, and finally turned them into an active installation. And now you see a photo documentation of some found objects from the same performance. These are just 4 from the hundreds. Another example from the same artist, as part of our longest live process, as I mentioned, Needed You, Darıcıoğlu's performance Looking After a Rose was actualized in this 4 square meters room covered with earth and roses. So they lived in this room for 28 days without leaving it even once. They spent their days looking at one rose each day. Now, I would like to continue with the documentation process of a long durational work. Of course, it's to say that long durational works are much more difficult to document and archive. Here, daily use objects utilized in long duration performances also become a remain as it is bearing the traces of the performance process. They are not simple objects anymore, of course. They become part of the performance. Let's take the artist's bed example. Especially in long duration works, when the artist lives in the performance, the place where he sleeps, eats, showers, and fulfills other needs become inseparable from the performance, thus becoming part of the work. What you see here is a 28 days old mattress in which the artist slept on for 28 days. They shared intimate moments with many people on it. In performance art, there is a unique relationship with matter. Quite often, it involves a special kind of relationship with things. How can we call it a regular bed? Maybe it's not an art object by itself, but it carries the memory and the time. So yes, performance art archive is not a traditional archive, but we need to develop new form and propose new formats. So here, clothes, bed covers, towels that artists use for 28 days all carry traces from the performance. We can see earth, blood stains that spread with time as they are survivors of time. Again, from the same performance, now we have remains that cannot be kept as it is. Of course, we kept every single item, the roses cut during the performance, and even the faded ones, the earth on the floor, as well as the candles, ropes, razors used by the artist during the process. But they include all kinds of organic materials that can be replaceable, reproduced for an exhibition in order to able to reactivate the experience transmission. In this case, we can witness the decay of the roses as time is passing by. I also need to say that according to these remaining journeys, museums should improve their preservation and conservation system techniques. This is also another huge topic. For example, these images are from our small warehouse where we keep the physical remains in our archive. It might probably seem insane to try to keep and make space for all these remains. I actually do not know how long we can continue to keep them in our building. So this is exactly why there is an urgent need to provide space and create a new storage solutions adapted the needs of live art. Another issue is that we also do not know how to preserve all of them. The absence of institutional guidance motivated us to work closely with artists, trying to find new solutions each time we come across a new form of remain. In the beginning, for example, we were keeping the remains packed in cardboard boxes. Later, we switched them with recycled plastic ones as they are more resistant. But we are still an amateur environment as we try to do our best with limited resources. So we need to more guidance as well as financial and academic support to develop this field. Those kind of archives are not easy to cope. Some of materials are very fragile, or some of them are very difficult to handle because of their size or weight. With a small team composed of all women, we are trying to do our best. So we notice performance art more and more in big museums and art events. So it's good to hear this. And for me, it's very exciting to see how museums are or will be changing their rules with time in order to preserve live works that involve human beings rather than objects. So meanwhile, there is no doubt that sometimes, of course, you cannot archive everything. Some remainings are impossible to keep. For example, in this performance, it is all about the sense of smell. To analyze the performance works that addresses senses such as touch and smell, I would like to mention one of Mekar Yurttaş's latest performance, in which they subject the audience to various scents in a certain order. The archive of this performance that contains organic ingredients, including various scents such as garlic, curry, cinnamon, they are kept in jars and archived in order to the artists use them during the performance, enabling the audience to experience it again. So this work is an accurate example of how to deal with that kind of organic materials. So there is a real need, as I mentioned, to construct alternative scientific models from the biological, environmental, or social sciences and alternative conceptual frameworks for the conservation of artists' performances in accordance with their nature within the museum. So this is an important example also for the remainings reproduction issue. There are two types of reproduction concerning remains. Either it is a choice or it is a must. In this case, it is a must. So accordingly, in 2021, we started working on creating our own live art collection. Our aim is to create a live art-oriented institutional collection that will set a precedent. We are researching and thinking together with the artists to explore in which forms performance art can enter in collections and to ensure that researchers, curators, and art institutions can also benefit. So, I talked about documentation, archive, and preservation. But what about, of course, collecting a live art piece itself? Let's consider collecting its essence. Traditionally, performance art was considered uncollectible, but of course it is collectible. It's good to challenge collectors, art institutions, and sometimes even artists changing the traditional approach, which is one of my major goals, as there is an urgent need. So, for the first time, we mentioned the re-performance right term in Mamut Art Fair in 2016 with an iconic approach. With this series of performance entitled Did You Notice the Performance? Here you see the artist sitting on a bench, wrapped, sitting on a bench here. I would like to show you the video again, how the audience did not notice her. And, you know, she sit there as a part of the red carpet, and even people walk through the red carpet, they didn't notice the performance, because, you know, people are used to entertained, but the performance art itself is definitely a physical and mental experience that should not be considered as an entertainment. This is why performances were discreetly spread in the fair space and waited to be noticed. Other performances from the same series, as you see here, the work explains itself. The artist is asking the question, would you like to buy this artwork for 9 hours a day by standing behind an empty frame? The artist criticized the object-bound focus of museums and the art market and key features attributed to live performance. So he explores the nature of performance art based on the foundations of research and criticism. The performance is aiming to inspire the audience to inquire about the performance art itself by highlighting its characteristics as being process-oriented, where the process end is in sync with the completion of the performance, and also its nature as being an art form which is impossible to be sold. Here, with this example, I would like to underline the approach of art markets is forcing to adapt or change the nature of the performance art, which is very sad, in order to make it collectible. So, what about hosting a live work that will live with you? Now let's think about a collector's house. If there is a sculpture in the garden, a painting on the wall, and a video artwork on the screen, why not dedicate a room to performance art? Imagine that the work is still active in the next room while we are sleeping. Is it really insane to try to provide a space that is adapted to performance art's nature? Therefore, I took that risk, and I offered collectors the possibility to exhibit a long duration of performance artwork at their home, asking them, what would you think of exhibiting, hosting, keeping alive a long duration performance work in your house? So Darıcıoğlu's performance, Incomplete, is an excellent example, an embodiment of how live art can be exhibited in homes, preserving its liveness. So here you see an intimate living space that turns into a performance art. So finally, a collector decided to share his private space with our artist Leman Sevda Darıcıoğlu without knowing about the idea of the performance. But then, even though the performance itself happened in the collector's house, he preferred to collect the video documentation of the performance with, again, a traditional approach rather than the re-performance, right? But luckily, almost 4 years later, we succeeded. Ekim Bernay's What Do You Want performance, re-performance, right, is now part of a private collection. As you see now on your screen, not with its photo nor with video documentation, but, you know, performance, re-performance rights, with the re-performance rights. So the work has been collected according to its nature. It's a huge crucial move since it clearly proves that the performance artwork is collectible and that you can collect it by preserving its nature. So respecting its organic liveness and without adapting to art market's expectations, I mean, without the need of converting to usual formats that they believe to be marketable, the collection of re-performance rights for the first time in Turkey has opened a new door. Collecting live art is about changing perspective, preserving live works that involve human beings. It's a journey between the collector and the artist. So after being collected, What Do You Want performance has been reactivated and re-performed as a part of Çanakkale Biennial exhibition. So it's very good because the cycle has been completed with this re-performance. We saw that the system is working, and it proved us once more that performance art is collectible. So, but what new skills and approaches are demanded by bringing live performance into collections? Performance also, puts museums under other types of resource pressure, as the display of performance is often very expensive, requiring a performance and sometimes producers to be hired for the duration of a show. This is also one of the reasons, why we have created this platform, Performistanbul. It's very difficult for an artist to concentrate on their work while communicating with different actors, such as different departments of the museums or art institutions or other performers, then preparing, providing, producing all kinds of materials related to the performance to take care of the documentation process, etc. So when an artist gets invited to perform in a museum or develop a performance idea that he would like to perform in a museum, this is when our platform steps in and takes care of all production stages and issues, as well as all the actors. During the preparation process and after the realization of the process, we deal with legal issues, including the copyright issues and re-performance rights. We collect the documentations and remains and add them to our archives so that they can be studied, reused, re-exhibited, and even shared with other archives and collections. And we go beyond to the next step. Imagine collecting the idea of a performance that has not been actualized yet. There is only its representation, as you can see now on your screen. In addition to the performance proposal, there is an agreement including all the requirements and guidelines necessary for the realization of the performance itself. So Atadore as light source performance idea added to a museum collection. So here we have another example of performance artwork acquisition for a public collection. This is why I would like to remind once more the urgent need for scholarly and practice-based reflection on the conceptual and practical challenges of collecting performance-based artworks. We really need to respect performance art nature as a non-material discipline. We should not obey the art market system, managing artworks as material objects. We should not adapt it or force it to change to more common and recognized art forms. As we all know, yes, it is a time-based art. The life of performance is only in the present. Yes, it is ephemeral, so it disappears. This is consequence. We need to accept this. As Peggy Fallon said, performance becomes itself through disappearance. But please let's consider performance not as mode of disappearance, but as an active force of creation, knowledge, and cultural memory. So I would like to thank the incredible Performistanbul team, as well as all the artists that created those inspiring works that became distinct examples of art history, thus providing me with all these materials that enable me today to discuss and share with you. So I would like to finish my words by expressing my gratitude to SALT team and all the participants who succeeded in planting the seeds to ensure the continuity of performance art in order to draw a line to the materialistic approach and change this traditional models. Thank you.
Many thanks, Simge, for your presentation. Maybe I can add one question regarding your archival collection, because you know we had a chance to work closely during the construction of Performistanbul space. Maybe it was 6 years ago. I know that one of the aims of Performistanbul was to present research materials on the local and international performance artists and make them available for the researchers. I know that the institution owns some audiovisual materials, the recordings of performances at your space. How do you make them available for the users? Are they still do you make them open? Are they open to them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our resource space is open to public, but people can come and visit us, and they can, make their research in our building. So they cannot have the book outside of the building or the documentations because of the, security problems. As old-fashioned, we have a DVD player, so all the digital documentations, digital archives are in DVDs, so you can have the DVDs and put in the DVD player and look at them. Also, for the books, again, you have to come to our research space and visit us, and please do. I see a question. Do you also have digital archive? One question is, do you also have digital archive open to online? Unfortunately, not yet. As I mentioned, you have to come to this space to go through our digital archive. But as I showed here, we have some websites that we are keeping performances, documentations. It is like a digital archive, but it's of course I think, change its forms during the creation of these kind of websites. So if you would like to, make your research through a pure documentations, you have to come and visit us. Another questions or?
Maybe.
Jason, as you mentioned, thank you again for your support of our beginning of journey. We started with your support.
Many thanks, Simge. Maybe I can add another question and then we can conclude the session. Parallel to the last question, do you have future plans for digital archiving?
Mm-hmm. Susan, in this field, it's also very, very difficult to collect the physical archive. So we have very limited sources in performance arts and live art fields. So that's why before turning this physical archive to digital archive, this field's archival processes systems should be improved. For example, the copyrights, the ebook rights. So many of the sources still do not have e-publication rights. That's why we cannot turn our physical archive to a digital because of the lack of the resources and the system, I can say.
Many thanks, Simge. Hope to hear more about Performistanbul, and we will follow your events.